I'm absolutely delighted that Clive Price has joined us. He is one of our two fellows. Adrian, the other, is over there, who you will hear from at some point in the coming months. And he is taking us on a journey that helps us look at what it is you need to understand to start to do business in China, that huge, complicated, exciting marketplace. And he should know, because he has lived in China and in Asia for many years. Early in his career, he was working with HSBC, writing speeches for Willy Purvis and other key people about what was going on in those markets. And he will talk about his new book today about China, and you'll see copies of this can be ordered upstairs. And he has another book he's going to talk about later in the year about Asia itself, broadly Asia. And you will hear more from David over time, because we will be launching some workshops very specifically aimed, yes, at people at the beginning of their professional careers, but also people now currently running companies in Scotland who need to understand, if you like, the playbook to get into these markets. So David, it's an immense pleasure for us that you're here. We're going to listen to what you have to say. After David's talk and presentation and engagement with you, and I won't take any of the tricks away from him, there are drinks upstairs. Again, thank you for the business school upstairs, where those of you who are having tea and coffee had them before. So thank you for coming. We look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Roddy. We all know the success story that is China. Compound GDP growth since 1995 of 9.5%. The second largest economy, among the top 10 trading nations, the most popular FDI destination after the ASEAN 5, the largest mobile phone market, the largest auto market, the second largest computer market, the third largest advertising market, cash reserves of US $3.75 trillion. 400 of the Fortune 500 companies have invested in China. And by 2020, there will be 10 new megacities in the inner provinces of almost 60 million people. It's a huge opportunity market for Western businesses. But we also know that it's not easy. Companies often have fears about the size of the market, the different mindset, the lack of legal and IP protection, which is very high on the problem list of most foreign companies, corruption, the language and cultural barrier. Even huge multinationals like Google and Tesco fail because they underestimate the difficulties of the market, or they lack the necessary targeted knowledge. They don't do their homework, in other words. And here we are in a university, you probably know a lot about that. I'm sure many of you here today share these concerns or have heard about these concerns. And even those who have operated in the market may well have found that they still don't have all the answers, or that they're not doing as well as they expected. And if they are, they're certainly not doing it as quickly as they expected. Some of you may be thinking about the China market or about other Asia markets in the future and feeling a little bit put off or intimidated by the size of the challenge. I want to help you find solutions to these problems and to explore the tremendous opportunities that lie in both China and in the rest of Asia. By listening to this talk, you're going to get a 3-step guide, an actionable passport for tackling the China markets, and there's many more than just one. This passport will help you with entry or expansion in China and into other Asian markets, so that by the end of these 40 minutes together, you'll have a much clearer idea of whether you want to go into the market, when you want to go in, and above all, how you want to go in, or to raise your performance if you're already there. And the visas for this passport are, in order of importance, number 1, courage. Number 2, empathy. And number 3, resilience. In China, you need courage and to take risks. I don't mean legal or operational risks or physical courage. I mean you need to change your mindset and your way of doing things to operate in a culture that is in many ways different to your own. And for those of you here that come from Asia, you just have to turn what I'm saying round the other way for you also to understand exactly what this kind of change in mindset is. Have you ever been in a situation, for example, when you feel too scared or too intimidated by another culture to join in? Have you ever said to yourself, this is too unfamiliar, I'm not even going to try it? Well, let me tell you a story. I'm about 3 weeks into my new job as the speechwriter for HSBC in Hong Kong. And I've only just got there, and I haven't really got into the local culture at all. I have hardly been out of the central business district. And I'm standing at my window in my office and thinking, it's time now that I really did something about getting out of this expatriate world that I'm in. And in the door comes a colleague of mine, a Chinese colleague, who I've made friends with, and she says to me, David, what about this weekend? You haven't done much so far. What about coming out with us? We're going to go out to the New Territories to a performance. And I think, oh, okay, that sounds great. So I'm saying, yeah, okay, right, we'll go to a performance. And then she says to me, it's going to be Chinese opera. And I go to her, oh, yeah. And inside I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do about this? Because I can't get out of it, and I should be taking part, but have you ever heard Chinese opera? Well, some of you certainly have, but I'd only heard a little bit on the TV, and it went something like this. And it went on pretty much, so I'm told, all night. So I'm standing there and I think, okay, right, I'm going to go. Yes, I say, let's go, let's try. So on the weekend, I go out to the New Territories, this lovely little village, and we sit down for the Chinese opera, and I'm sitting in my seat in the third row and thinking, oh God, how long? And the opera starts. And within about 10 minutes, I'm totally entranced. I couldn't believe it. They're going across the stage. They're doing all this sort of thing, pirouetting and doing the kung fu, and the Imperial Guard's coming in, and the Emperor is standing there, and she's making gestures like this, and then there's a courtesan beautifully made up, and she's also doing that, etc., etc., and it goes on, and there's wonderful twitching movements with the head to express emotion and feelings, and I think, wow. I'm totally into it. So that by the time we get to the first interval, I'm really looking forward to the second act. And then my friends say, okay, David, that's fine, you've done well, now we're going to dinner. So I think, okay, well, I was going to watch more, but anyway, we go to dinner. So we're going off down the path to the little street down to the restaurant, and I can see it's a very simple little restaurant. There's some Chinese calligraphy on the front, characters saying so and so, and I can't read it fully, but I do see one word, soup. And I think, safe. Soup. Okay, so we get in there, and we sit down at a table, and then in the corner of the room I can see what seems to be a wriggly little thing being squeezed. It's obviously the last juice of the bile, is it, or whatever it is, the tract that's going into a white a cup of white liquid, which is going to be used as snake wine. Perhaps you know about this, for the old gentleman sitting in the corner. And I'm thinking, well, I don't know, I've said yes so far, let's go for this. So I'm sitting there expecting, with the soup's coming towards me, and I'm thinking, oh, bits of rather greasy looking thing floating on the surface. Well, I'll try to hold my nose and put it down. And it's served, and it's a soup, yes, and it's a rather tasty soup. The snake is actually a bit like chicken. And after a little while, I'm warming up. My ears are warming. Everything's warming. It's a cold evening. It's in winter in Hong Kong. And by the end of the meal, I'm feeling fantastic. I really enjoyed it. What a fabulous evening. Chinese opera, snake soup. I go back to the bank and I think, wonderful. What a success. I'm going to say yes some more to things. So you see, that's the kind of mindset that you have to learn. The readiness to participate, which is coming from Asia to the West, and from here outwards to Asian countries. You have to participate and learn other Asia cultures and business worlds, both China and other Asian markets. And that got me, finally, after leaving HSBC, I started off my own company, and I moved out of Hong Kong with different branches into different Asian markets, and I could use the little system that I'd started with myself, and in fact I became quite famous for it, for saying yes to everything, trying everything. In every culture, Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, wherever it was, Myanmar, Korea, Japan, try everything if you can. And if you can't, at least make the first steps towards trying something. And that was the lesson in mindset. And it's a lesson that I think stood me in good stead for my own business. And I think it's also a great thing to learn for life in general. So in fact, you must learn this lesson to win in every Asia market. You have to learn competitive intelligence, not only about your competitors, but also about losing and saving face, the right approach to contracts and negotiations, the Chinese consumer's attitude to foreign brands, local beliefs and tastes, the very different needs and expectations of the younger Chinese and the younger Asians called the Generation Y, or the Millennials, as they're known. And you also need competitive intelligence on how to protect yourself from legal and corruption issues. In fact, I have something special for you on this, which I'll come to later. So, what's the best way to get this competitive intelligence? Empathy. Empathy is not only cultural preparation or change of mindset, although it is both of these. It's also understanding what the consumer wants in China, what the market wants, what the market is all about, and how different that may be to your expectations. It's about learning the local cultural characteristics, finding trusted and long-term partners, enlisting the help and advice of old China hands, old China expats, and market entry specialists. And it's about immersing yourself, making your company Chinese with British characteristics, to use a historical phrase. Not 100% Chinese, of course, but enough to assume a Chinese persona and identity. Just like I'm going to do now by changing my jacket. Of course, assuming a new identity is not quite as simple as putting on another jacket, but it's certainly symbolic of what you have to do to get into the mindset of another culture. China is vast and diverse, and the Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities coming online in many provinces are not like the coastal Tier 1 cities. There are many consumer markets, many segments of the vast and growing middle class, many demographic and social segments. And you simply, if you want to succeed in China, you've got to know them. There is a saying, one China, four worlds. And this refers to the wealth gap between the highly developed megacities in the coastal areas, the moderately wealthy inner cities, the less affluent country-level cities, and the really basically poor countryside. And that the poor countryside is also spread out throughout all this wonderful looking map of the different provinces. The sheer vastness of the country is reflected in the number of provinces stretching from Shanghai in the east to Tibet in the west, from Inner Mongolia in the north to Guangdong here in the south. So China is really a conglomeration of markets, divided by economic development, industrial priorities, and, above all, local cultures. In fact, China's provinces should be treated almost as a collection of separate countries. The GDP levels of these provinces are predicted to be the equivalent to the GDP of many separate countries by 2020. That is only in 6 years' time. They represent a union of second-tier developing and top-tier developed countries. The richest provinces are mainly on the eastern and the southern side, but even Xinjiang in the far west will have a GDP equivalent to that of Israel by the year 2020. These are all comparisons. In such a huge and diverse market, in order to succeed, you have to learn the correct etiquette, local customs, and business culture. You also have to tailor your branding and marketing to these very diverse individual markets. And above all, you have to build long-term relationships that stretch out right into the distance, and local networks in the Chinese style. Business in China is intensely personal. Guanxi, literally translated as connections, are at the heart of the Chinese business world. These networks of obligation and trust are vital for long-term business. That doesn't necessarily mean corruption and lack of legal protection. China is changing, and many of the perceived failings in the Chinese system are not due to deliberate manipulation, but to a lack of cultural understanding on the part of foreigners. So, how can you overcome this lack of understanding and navigate the possible pitfalls? Such questions are vital for foreign companies in China. Hands up if you're interested and would like to be protected from corruption and IP risks in China. Anybody here interested in this question? Certainly some of the businessmen in the room, yes. And it is a question that's very high on the, shall we say, what can I do about it list of foreign companies going into China or considering that. Unfortunately, we don't have time to address all these issues today, but I have a very special gift for you, a free checklist on IP and legal protection in China, which I've called Route 88, How to Manage Business Risks in China. And as you know, or you may know, 8 and double 8 in particular are highly lucky, meaning prosperity in Chinese. In this checklist, I will offer you some approaches to make you more confident for your thinking about business in China And it will be very good for your students also to have an understanding of what the issues might be and more confident in your business dealings both in and with China and potential Chinese clients in UK and China. So if my team will help me hand out the questionnaire. There's a questionnaire that will be handed out, and if you'd like to fill it in right now, there's just 3 boxes to tick, and maybe you can put your details. Please put your details there with your email and name. And the first question is, yes, David, please send me a free checklist. That's one of them. The second one is to indicate your interest in the upcoming Asia Scotland Institute workshops, which will not only be about China, but will also be about individual Asian countries. And for those that are really ready for business in Asia or China and are really interested in these workshops, you are welcome to apply for a free 30-minute strategy consultation with me. Imagine how serious that must be. Via Skype or phone, just put your details in there. My Skype address is on the questionnaire. So I'll leave you to have a look and fill in the form and just hand it back for collection when you're finished. And then I'll send you the report and the Asia workshop information via email with this talk, after this talk. So I just pause for a couple of moments, for a few minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, to allow you to do this. The next essential visa on your passport, as I said earlier, number 3 is resilience. As you may have heard, China is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Enormous amounts of patience are required. The Chinese do not consider the contract or the deal as the central point of a business relationship. They believe much more in a carefully nurtured relationship over time. With 4,000 years of history and a vast forward-moving country that is already almost the world's largest economy, they have no need for rapid Western-style negotiations. They are communal in thought and action, consensus-driven, and believe only in the total value of a business relationship as revealed over time, not in short-term deals, ba-bom, 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 as we are trained to think in the West. Yes, there are exceptions, particularly in e-commerce and online shopping, but patience is regarded as a prime virtue in China business. Foreigners often don't have this patience. I wonder if you've ever been in a situation where you feel a bit out of your depth and you have no idea what the heck is going on. Well, one of my clients had just such an experience in Beijing only 6 months ago. He went to Beijing to meet the chairman of a large company that had told him that there was a business deal in the offing. The company had told him there was a business deal in the offing. So he went to Beijing highly excited and turned up at the office fresh one morning, was taken up in the elevator to an office that stood with a great view of the Forbidden City in the distance. And the secretary is there ready to receive him. And he's being ushered into the room and thinking, this is a great deal. This is really exciting now, what's going to happen? Until he gets to the door and the chairman meets him in perfect Chinese, of course, and he realizes that there's no interpreter in the room. He tries some English, no go. The two of them he is being ushered into the chairman's presence, and the secretary is getting ready to go. She's going to bring them in some tea. He says to her, "But surely there's an interpreter." "Oh, no, I'm sorry, we don't have one until later today. But I will bring you some tea. but that was about the maximum that the secretary could say in English. Cha, cha, yeah, no, okay, but the tea is coming. So he sits down and he thinks, well, this is going not very well. So they both sit there looking at each other and making, nice sort of bowing and humming and sort of looking out of the window and again smiling and looking out of the window. And the tea is brought, 5 minutes past, 10 minutes past, another cup of tea is poured. The chairman looks at him. He looks at the chairman. Both continue to quietly nod and smile at each other. 15 minutes elapses. And then eventually my client friend gets up and says, very kind, very nice of you to receive me today, Chairman, and I will be leaving now. And the secretary ushers him out. He goes down in the elevator, back to the hotel, falls down on his bed and thinks, oh my God, what a disaster. Why the heck didn't I bring the interpreter with me or get this sorted out before I get there? And he has a sleepless night. The whole deal is up in smoke. Except in the morning, there's a phone call. And it is the chairman's assistant, this time speaking in English, fully, clearly to him. And she says, the chairman would like to meet you this afternoon at 4:30. He finds that you're somebody that he could definitely do business with. And my client friend thinks to himself, what? And he says, but surely we weren't communicating with each other. Oh no, says the assistant. The chairman thought that he said that he'd never met such a patient Western businessman or from another Western country, and also that didn't speak business all the time. So you see, what you can misunderstand in other cultures is of the essence. You have to prepare for this, the unknown, the unexpected, and being patient and flexible. The other essential for success in China is the ability to make mistakes. And this relates to the first visa I showed you of courage. Nobody won in China, or indeed in many other Asian markets, without mistakes. The question is, how do you react to those mistakes? Mistakes of etiquette, or choice of partner, business sector or market, government or local government relations, and so on. Let me tell you about one of my mistakes. I don't know if you've ever been in this situation, but sometimes it takes a big fall for us to discover the qualities of resilience that will make us or our business successful. When I was a boy, I was the lead actor in the school play. And it was one of those plays by a German playwright called Bertolt Brecht, in which the action takes place on the stage and it's demonstrated to the audience by the narrator who sits out the front and comments on the action, and that was my role. Well, I was quite the actor in those days, and I liked all this, and I was really into it. I sat cross-legged at the front of the stage, and I was doing with a nice costume on, and I was doing all the gesturing, etc., when suddenly in the middle of one of my monologues, I heard a crack, and then a second crack, and the whole of the left-hand side of the platform out the front had leaned over to the left. I was rolling down, and I was more or less where Roddy is now, right next to the chairman of the governors and the local mayor. And there's this horrifying sort of silence in the room, and then a slight titter, nervous titter. But what did I do? The only thing that you can do. I carried on. I got up from this position here. I started to brush myself down. I remembered line 32 on page 46 of the script. I continued talking, climbed back up onto the stage, back to my position, sat down, carried on straight on there. By the time we got to the end, the audience was enraptured. They were all applauding, oh, fabulous, fabulous. I wondered what I'd done. And it's what we all have to learn to do. And particularly in China or Asia markets, you have to be ready to brush yourself down, Make those mistakes because they're important, because you learn from them, but brush yourself down and carry on where you left off. Be prepared to make mistakes. Be prepared to learn from them. And they won't only be social and cultural, although the whole notion of saving face, etc., is very complex. They will also be operational. Think markets. Think clusters. I've been working for about 10 years with Asia's #1 provider of beauty products, operating out of Hong Kong into different Asian markets. And I've been helping them with their strategic positioning and messages, etc. And I also helped them with China. Now, the one part of the business that hasn't gone well for these last 10 years is China. And why? Because their branding, their name, their positioning, everything is fine in the other Asian markets. Why not China? Because they're opening everywhere. They're opening in department stores, they're opening one, as you saw from the map earlier, this vast country, all different cultures, all different levels of affluence, all different levels of openness to different, to foreign brands, etc. And this is a company operating Hong Kong Chinese out of Hong Kong. And they can't make it exactly work until they found out what was the essential rationalization. You have to find clusters. You have to make your marketing, positioning, branding, everything localized. And this was their #1 discovery. And since then, the business has started to go better in China because they're thinking segmentation. They're thinking of the different geographical segments, but also the different market segments. They're thinking localization, local culture, how they position their brand to that particular part of China or that particular level of city. And they're thinking of building a China team, a purely China team. And this process we call, I don't know, most of you have heard it maybe, glocalization. How many of you here have heard of the word glocalization? Yeah, 1, 2, 3. Yes, the business people have heard the word glocalization. Making your global, in inverted commas, brand local. Positioning it for a local market. Finding out the correct market intelligence and competitive intelligence to successfully operate in those markets. But you don't only have to take my word for it. Listen to the words of China's richest man and social media mogul from Baidu, which is the equivalent of Google in China, on foreign companies' big mistakes with branding and marketing in China.
担不担心外国的互联网公司啊，跑到中国来，把你的饭吃掉了？
我觉得是，如果他们有这个本事的话呢，是好事儿，就多一些这个竞争进来，因为整个市场它在高速的成长，有竞争的话呢，大家的这个竞争能力都更强，大家的这个水平都更高，这是好事儿。但是我们看，就是过去这10几年，就中国互联网的发展历史啊，其实没有太多成功的这个外国公司。我觉得最主要的一个原因呢，就是说他们过去呢没有真正的把中国作为一个独立的市场来研究，很多做法呢是想当然。就是现在就是中国互联网领域，我们有一个很流行的词儿叫做接地气。
接地气，
对，就是你 how do you connect to the ground？对，这个话呢，就是说那些如果你不能够知道
local
对本土的东西具体的情况的话，你是很难在这个市场上站住脚跟的。我记得就是10几年前呢，有一个网站。就是它的这个域名叫做 myrice.com， 这个呢就是它中文呢叫做多莱米，我不知道就是有多少人还记得这个网站哈，当时为什么起这个名字呢？他们说中国呢主要是一个农民的这种国家，所以多莱米呢就是让大家觉得说有这种有感觉，说这是我们想要的。其实，如果你了解中国的话，你会发现说，当时的中国网民呢，可能大概也就是1、2千万， 这1-2千万会上网的人，他一定不是说吃饭吃不饱的那些人。所以你起个多莱米对他来说他没感觉，他是觉得是你骂我吧，我不是农民，对吧？其实同样的错误，05年就是 Google 进中国的时候也犯，他起了一个Google 的中文名字叫谷歌，啊，你可以就是去百度一下这个谷歌当时他是怎么解释的啊？他说是叫丰收之歌，啊，谷啊就是米是 rice 对吧？谷是 grain， 啊，他觉得说中国人是这个丰收了他就高兴，就是同样的对吧？就是真正当时中国上网的人是不太在乎这个丰收不丰收的，所以你用这种想当然办法在中国去做生意的话呢，那就失败的概率是很高的。
So don't call your products Song of the Harvest or myrice.com for China. And the same thing applies for all foreign companies operating in China. For example, listen to other companies' reports from the Coalface. I was recently at a conference on doing business in China in Edinburgh, and several of the speakers represented UK and Scottish companies operating in China. And here's a small selection of what they said. Start thinking as a Chinese. Be undercover. In fact, one of them even suggested go undercover, which is a bit James Bond, but you can see where he's coming from. You've got to act local. Do your homework. Listen to your Chinese team. Become a Chinese company. Choose your partner and know your partner. And make your brand at least seem Chinese. To recap then, why do you need a passport for China business success? And what should be the visas on that passport? And any of you remember exactly what it was? Number 1 was courage. Number 2, empathy. And number 3, resilience. Yes. And so what can you do right now with these visas? How can you go beyond considering doing business in China to taking action? How can you make your first steps easier? You can go ahead and try the passport. You can get your visa stamped into your passport ready for the journey. And that's exactly what we'll be doing with the Asia Scotland Institute workshops. And that is if you want to make a recce visit, a reconnaissance, as you should do if you are really serious about doing business in Asia markets, or develop your presence, as you must do, as I'm sure the businessmen in the room will acknowledge. And I have one final tip for you. Your passport comes with full documentation on relationships, choosing partners, networking, conflicts, negotiating, communications, and presentation. You've already signed up, thank you very much, for a free checklist on how to manage risks in China. And some of you, I hope, have already signed up for a free strategy consultation with me on your China business plans or your ideas about China business, or indeed your plans for other Asia markets. All these strategies I've mentioned today are covered in much more detail in my book, The Master Key to China, which will be published on the 4th of April. And you can get your advance copy here for a discounted £10 upstairs, and I will very happily sign copies at the end of this event. There will also be more strategy forms there in case you've messed yours up or otherwise not succeeded with them. And I hope to share with you individually after this, after the Q&A this evening, perhaps when we also move on to a Chinese meal afterwards. And I thank you very much for your attendance today. I wish you every success with your business in China, thinking about business in China, and thinking about business or doing business above all in Asia. And finally, here are all the necessary links for more information. Please feel free to note them down. Thank you. Well, are there any questions? Yes.
Just say who you are.
My name's Adam Groudus. I'm a Master of Chinese Studies student. I was just wondering, in your experience of investing in China, what the regulatory environment's been like, because from my own studies, it's not too transparent policy formation.
Sorry,
in government.
which environment?
So the regulatory environment, and
yes.
I know that Goldman Sachs ran into some trouble recently with, they were involved in oversight of the business in China, and I think they ended up getting expelled. I'm not too clear on it, but I was just wondering, in your own, is it quite a stable regulatory environment?
It's an improving regulatory environment. In the last 10, 12 years, China has made substantial steps to take on board both European and US regulatory standards to apply in China. So although perhaps the compliance is not as high as one would expect in some Western countries, certainly there's a big advance in the entire business environment and governance environment in China.
Thank you. Ashley Lloyd, I'm in the business school here. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what happened with Marks and Spencer's in China. There might be some lessons in there for what not to do, perhaps.
Well, there could be the same kinds of, exactly what I was talking about with my Hong Kong company. It's much to do with segmentation, and Marks and Spencer's, I think, found out that they had to find the right partner, which is, I think, we also mentioned earlier, partner or partners, and that they hadn't really considered globalization, which means also that you must find the right partner, and you also must segment your market and think in terms of exactly what market you're aiming for. Taking over a product from a Western country straight into a vast market like China and then expecting it to automatically work is going to get you into trouble. I think that's the conclusion there.
Hi, I'm Manish from the University of Edinburgh. I wanted to ask if you see in the near future, or I mean even further longer, a paradigm shift from say a manufacturing base that China is to a more innovation center, to a more research-based development happening on that side of the world.
Yes, this is the current plenum is talking very strongly about this question of rebalancing the Chinese economy away from so much dependence on manufacturing and consumption of commodities towards services, towards innovation, and towards the kind of knowledge economy that countries like the UK are good at exporting. So yes, that is very much the government's line, to encourage innovation, knowledge, technology for the future.
Hi, I'm Ioana. I'm an economics student here at the
Hi.
University of Edinburgh. One of the last pieces of advice that you gave us was go undercover. And I'm not sure that I understand. Can you please detail? Like, going undercover meaning hiding your own personality, but I don't think that in business you actually meant that.
No, I did. I think what the businessman at the CBBC Business in China meeting the other day really meant was not so much, do this, but be discreet. Find your own way, in the Chinese way if possible, to both position yourself, market yourself, and make relationships. Really meant sort of, don't be the same kind of quite thrusting, what we normally consider the American style, a little bit of direct business approach. And I think that's what he was really implying, rather than, as I say, be James Bond or be secretive.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any more questions? Yes? Yeah, sure.
Sorry, just ask another one. How do you see, what do you see for the role of, obviously if you're investing in China, the role of Chinese domestic consumption in continued economic growth, and how do you see normally quite high Chinese saving rates playing out in the future? Do you think that Chinese will become, as consumers, they'll be more frivolous,
Yeah, well, again, it's very much the part of the rebalancing of the economy to encourage domestic consumption, yes. And there are all kinds of ways in which the government is trying to do that and to redirect the economy from so much dependence on state-controlled enterprise and manufacturing, as we've said, towards domestic consumption, services, and a whole range of subjects that are more in the more advanced Western style of doing business and of selling, which will unlock some of this extraordinary high savings rate, which I fully understand what you mean. So very much going towards, of course at the higher level, the Chinese are very good at spending money on luxury goods, for example, these days, but only a certain segment of the Chinese population and only in certain parts of China. Another one.
Very interesting, David. Thank you. What will this mean, say, moving towards a service-based economy and moving factories out to, say, other parts of Asia which are cheaper, like Burma, Cambodia, and so forth? What will this mean for employment in China? Will unemployment rise?
Well, the government policy is to rebalance in the sense of if employment is lost because of manufacturing moving offshore in Asia, to replace that with a lot of new knowledge industries and innovatory industries and service industries above all, which I see that from the latest plenum report, the government is very much thinking in terms of encouraging further foreign investment in different sectors of the economy and opening up even those state-owned sectors of the economy, state-controlled sectors, to certain parts of them to foreign investment as well. So there's a whole sort of, yes, we're encouraging more foreign investment this way into this kind of sector, and yes, we're losing some manufacturing this way, but it's intended to be a huge balancing act, which China, to give its credit, is very good at, a gradualist approach over the long term.
My name's Ross, I'm a student at Edinburgh. I was just wondering, this is a little bit more political, but I think it has big economic ramifications. If you look at China politically, where it's come from in its origins since it became communist, it's had already to make huge changes in its policy to open up economically and give more room for the West to come in. Do you think that China's going to be able to continue this kind of political path of kind of opening up and changing its policies, or do you think there's going to have to be a breaking point where it's going to have to radically change? And if so, do you think that companies and big companies in China could have more of an impact on that, say, than some countries in the West, governments themselves who have found it difficult to negotiate with China when it's so powerful and has such a sway? Do you think that companies or businesses could have a big part to play in that, or do you think it's not really on their agenda?
I think there are two parts to that question. The first was the radical shift. Is there going to be a radical shift? The second part I got a little bit lost in the...
Yeah, so if, for instance, if like some Western countries would like to see that kind of radical shift in government in China, for instance, from changing from the Communist Party to something more open and democratic, which obviously is very unrealistic, do you think that it's on any big international company's agenda to try and, if they could, influence that? Because obviously countries even as powerful as the United States in the West and even the UN are not able to really influence at all at the moment.
Yeah, I don't think China is it's like a huge juggernaut moving slowly forward, and it's extremely proud of its destiny, which it refers to as the Chinese dream. It's unlikely that it's going to be influenced by Western liberal wishes of any sort. And as for Western companies intervening in some way or hoping that there's some radical shift, I think the radical shift is definitely not on the agenda, nor should it be, because this is a very carefully thought out and forward-moving, gradual forward-moving economy and polity, if I can use that word, that we are presumptuous really to think that we would know better.
Well, David, thank you. I think we're now reaching the witching hour when the wine won't run out, but it might evaporate if we don't go and address it shortly. I'm immensely grateful to you. This is extremely, as I said at the beginning, this is taking us into sort of the granular aspects of how we engage with these markets. China's last 5-year plan started off by saying a happy China is a happy world, or a happy world is a happy China. So China's position within the developing world is something it's critically important for us to understand, and I think David has begun to take us along that path. There are other questions, not only as some of you are asking, to do with the detailed future of Chinese economy, and there are people in this room who have been directly involved with it. But for example, where does China stand as a world power? What is China's position in terms of foreign policy? We've seen China abstaining from very many significant votes, an apparent reluctance to step forward in the Asia-Pacific area to play a leadership role. But we will see what happens as China evolves and becomes more confident in perhaps engaging in foreign affairs. So in thanking David, I would also like to say that in a way this is a precursor to the next time we get together, which is on the 14th of April, when Dominic Barton, the global head of McKinsey worldwide, who was formerly the head of McKinsey in Asia, will be coming to the business school to talk about his view of Asia, and he will very much, certainly in that, be including his analysis of the many sub-markets within China, so if you like, picking up on the themes that David has very kindly spoken about. So that's the 14th of April. Save the date, in the evening here at the business school. So on your behalf, let me please ask you if we could all thank David, and we'll have a chance to ask him more questions upstairs. David, thank you so much.